So I'm live on YouTube. I'm gonna be live on LinkedIn in a second. I'm gonna be live on LinkedIn. I'm gonna be live on LinkedIn in a second. So did I go live on LinkedIn as well? Now I'm gonna be live on WhatsApp. I'm gonna send this message to people on WhatsApp. Alright. I'm gonna go here. So 205th episode. There we go on WhatsApp, and there's another WhatsApp thing, right? Yes, there you go. So live on YouTube, live on LinkedIn, and live on WhatsApp. Now let's begin. If you can hear me, say something, and we will begin the show that we deserve. The show that we deserve, folks. The show that we deserve. It inspires us, it informs us, it sets us up in the morning. The show that we deserve. Can you hear me? Let's go, says Mr. Tushar Tiwari. Good morning, Mr. Tiwari. Good morning. Let us begin. Bum bum bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Bum 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 bum. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Thinker's Frequency. We're having such a good time. This is the peak of human civilization. We're working so hard, doing such good work for ourselves, our parents, our kids, our siblings, our husbands, our wives, our friends, everybody. Well, not other people's husbands and wives, I hope. And just when we thought things couldn't get any better, like they couldn't possibly get any better, they just did. Call it divine intervention, folks, but things just got a whole lot better. Now we have Thinker's Frequency, our daily mental workout, our weekly mental workout, our weekly dose of insights and analysis that don't lead to paralysis right before we punch in. So let's continue with our journey of reading between the lines, things that are especially interesting and important in the world of business and finance. Let's go. Oh, but before we go, you gotta follow tradition, right? You know the tradition. You know the sweet and sacred tradition of the simultaneous sip. We'll all sip something together and it'll bring us good luck, as it always does without fail every day. And all you need for the simultaneous sip is a cup or mug, a glass, a tank, a chalice, a stein, a canteen jug, a flask, or a vessel of any kind. Pour it with your favorite liquid. I like some hot water with black pepper in it. And here we go. Beautiful. Beautiful. Let's do it again. Sublime. You know what the simultaneous sip says, right? You know what it says? It says that you are not alone. It says that we're in this together. It's such a beautiful thing to say. With that out of the way, let's begin. So we know what happened last week. A lot of things happened. Let's begin with the globe, right? Gold had a real roller coaster of a ride. It rose and then it fell and then it got back up again. Gold, by the way, has been extremely beneficial for anybody who must have been investing. Gold and silver have literally topped everyone out. They have always been hedges against the fiat system, and that fiat system seems to be showing inherent weaknesses that the entire investment community is going long on gold. For the first time in a long time, in about 20-30 years, central banks share central banks repository have more gold than US treasuries, which is a first, which is basically de-dollarization in a nutshell. A lot of aspects led to gold's rise and silver's rise accompaniment. And one of those things was essentially how US and EU sort of collided in the pursuit of Greenland, in US pursuit of Greenland. That was one of the reasons, one of the symptoms of the underlying malaise. Viewers of Thinkers Frequency would remember how we've been talking about gold since over 6 months now. Over 6 months, way over 6 months, we've been talking about how gold is the hedge against geopolitical instability, against fiat system's weaknesses, and as fiat system gets weakened and geopolitical instability keeps rising, gold will rise. Gold will rise even after the shock has happened and has destroyed everything. Gold begins to fall after the economy starts to rebuild. That's what we've been saying, and that's what we've been seeing, right? So we started talking about gold when we began Thinkers Frequency. That was about 6 months ago now, right? 200 episodes almost straight, and then 5 episodes for a month. So must be about 7, 8 months. Gold is up 95% since the past year. Since the past year, gold is up 95%. We've been talking about silver, but we've said silver is very volatile, right? Silver, by the way, has been up 277% in the past year, right? And this is very much in line with whatever we've been talking about. So you must have benefited. I hope you had some allocation in gold, right? That would have been amazing. A lot of questions are like, what happens to gold now? What happens to gold now? Well, it's always a difficult play. But what's the bottom line is that the geopolitical instability and the fiat problems aren't going away. So fundamentally, despite the volatility, gold is not going anywhere, right? Gold only starts to taper down, as we've said before, when the underlying economy is in a rebuild phase. So when you go back now, not doing analogy thinking, but when 2008-9 happened, right, when the great financial crisis happened, gold was inching up as it was shaping up, right, the crisis. Now the crisis shaped up, gold peaked at about 2011-12. That's when the economy sort of was in a rebuild phase, everything was settled down, and then gold tapered down. Now, that is an analogy. The fundamental is, when do people become comfortable by going away from gold? In going away from gold, when would you feel comfortable in going away from the most stable store of value, right? When the economy is going to get rebuilt, there are new opportunities that are looking green. The stability, overall stability, the worst seems to be over, right? The overall stability seems to be very clear. That's when you go off gold, and then when people go off gold, that's when the prices of gold start trickling down. So that time is not right now. In fact, if anything, gold has a lot of room to go up, right? Silver, nobody can say silver, what happens to silver, because silver is extremely volatile. However, even silver should not be going anywhere because silver is utilitarian. Silver is a byproduct of copper. And I mean, in the mining process, it comes as a byproduct of copper. And then silver's rise also is very important with the entire aspect of the technology rise which is happening. The paradigm, it fits there, right? So these are the two things that happened with gold. If you looked at the big tech, Microsoft shares really tumbled. Amazon fired about 30,000 people. So they've let go about 16,000 people. They said they have 1 million robots working, right? 1 million robots, and they've fired 16,000 right now and 14,000 earlier. So that means 30,000 people, right? It's very bad out there when it comes to big tech and the hiring prospects and so on and so forth. Microsoft stock went like down 10% in one day. So if you look at 1 month, it's down 11%. All the gains that it made, in a year, Microsoft stock is essentially down 2% in the past year, which is so weird, right? So a lot of actions happening. This should remind you of what we've been talking about when it came to Dr. Michael Burry's predictions about Nvidia and Palantir. Now, Nvidia says China, by the way, has given a go ahead of buying Nvidia chips for its companies, the big three, right? So, Nvidia is not really looking very weak right now. However, everything is so let's say convoluted that Dr. Michael Burry's thesis still holds true. So Nvidia, Palantir, the entire big tech in general. Let's look at Amazon stock for a second. Amazon stock 5 days, it's stable. 1 month 4%, 6 months 4%, 1 year 1.9%. So as you can see, it's not exactly the best thing that is happening with big tech. Are these the cracks that everybody was talking about? They might as well be. Speaking of gold, speaking of stocks, the global stocks, speaking of Bitcoin has been the laggards of all laggards. I've really been enjoying the memes that are being circulating when it comes to Bitcoin rise and fall, right? So if you look at Bitcoin, it's down today. It's down 3%, 2.6%. In a week, it's down about 7%. In a month, 6%. And in a year, in 1 year, it's down 17%. So Bitcoin has really become a shitcoin. Sorry, a shit joke, but it always works, right? If it's not new and it doesn't get old, it's a folk song or it's a shit joke. Anyway, so that's Bitcoin. If you remember, now viewers of Thinkers Frequency would remember, while we talked about everything, this is what I said. When everybody said that Bitcoin is a hedge against the fiat economy, the Bitcoin is a hedge against, the geopolitically, I said no. If anything, Bitcoin is a leading indicator of what might happen to the rest of the play, right? That's what I said. I told you, like I told you. Didn't I tell you? What did I tell you? And when did I tell you? A long time ago. And what happened? Exactly like, I feel like an African lady in hindsight, but that's what happened, right? So Bitcoin really fell. And if it is to be considered as a leading indicator of anything, times are very weird. Speaking of Bitcoin, MicroStrategy, the essentially an index to Bitcoin, right? The company that is in the toilet. Let's see what happens with that, folks. Now let's come to India. India is doing well, but India's currency troubles are very huge, right? India's currency fell 7% this fiscal. If you remember, when I was talking about an investor who I was pitching my company to, a foreign investor, he said it's not your fault that you're a part of a dead economy. And that was a very serious attack. And his thesis was very simple. Objectively, he said, even if we invest in your company and your company does very well, every year Indian currency loses about 5% of its value against dollar, right? So in 5 years, essentially, if you keep losing 5%, right, the investment essentially becomes half of what it was, even if it grows, right? So, and then comes the tax and so on and so forth. That particular insight is playing out on a macro level, where FDIs are huge net sellers, FPIs are huge net sellers. They are going away from the Indian economy. Yet the Indian stock market, the markets are essentially pretty solid when it comes to the DII support, the domestic investor base. That's solid. So the markets are not going anywhere. But India needs to figure out. Now a lot of aspects are being thrown when it comes to rupees devaluation. Is the rupee devaluation intentional on the part of the country, or is it something that we are not being able to control? Right? Now, dumb people who don't know much, they think, oh, rupee is falling, this government is screwing it up. But rupee is falling. So India is a net import nation, right? India imports a lot of crude, a lot of a lot of fuel and so on and so forth. But as it imports, because the crude price is pretty benign, let's say, right? India's import bill is not really hurting anybody, the country, right? And India's devalued currency becomes a hedge against the export tariffs that are being placed on India by United States. So essentially, it's in favor of the country to have a weak currency right now. If you remember, viewers of Thinkers Frequency would remember, we've talked about how devaluation is the reason why Chinese manufacturing could rule over the world. You remember that? We've talked about that. Devaluation was the reason why Chinese economy killed everything, right? They just kept devaluing their currency, and everybody else's exports became uncompetitive, and they won, right? And it's in India's interest to do that right now, because if crude was very high, right? If crude was extremely high, the import bill would have crushed India. But since crude essentially is pretty benign, import bill isn't crushing India, and the exports are getting favored. You know, speaking of exports, now we can come to the European trade deal, the EU India FTA, the mother of all deals, that has been referred to as the mother of all deals, by European Union and also by India. Now, this deal is very, very good for India because, of course, a lot of segments. So, if you look at gem and jewelry, which is a $17 billion play when it comes to EU, if you look at the marine supplies, you know, marine as in seafood, US had a 50% tariff. You take some of it. If you consider just today, there is news about submarine development with Mazgaon Dock, right? So that goes on. Mazgaon Dock is against defense share. Did you look at the defense share, by the way, folks? When Indian equities fell for a day and then got back up, defense shares literally killed it, right? Mazgaon Dock, GRSE, BEL, HAL, they're all coming back, and we've been talking about that a lot, right? So shipbuilding and defense and all of those plays, they are basically picking up. Defense is also picking up because of the EU FTA. It specifically focuses a lot on defense and on shipbuilding as an industry. So those two things, they are obviously killing it. And if you look at the other play, right, when it comes to exports, so a lot of brouhaha was existing or was getting born out of the concern of the automotive sector, that we have cut down the import tariffs when it comes to luxury vehicles. So a lot of people felt that it's going to hurt the automotive sector. But if you look at the strata at which it's been done, it's basically pretty premium, 20 to 40,000 that euros. That's one segment. 40 to 60,000, 60,000 plus. The major tariffs that are being going out are basically the top of the tree. So automotive sector is pretty safe right now. However, it's not as good as the consumer commercial vehicle sector. That is green. That's very green, right? Commercial vehicle sector's growth, if you remember, as automotive sector grew in India, commercial vehicle sector also grew, the tractors and all, and they had a much better growth rate than the commercial than the auto sector, the four-wheelers and so on and so forth. So a lot of things happening in the automotive sector, but the bottom line is the commercial vehicle sector is gonna be what's green, right? Numbers came out. Tata Motors came out with its numbers. A lot of people came out with their numbers, and they all fell. First of all, the labor codes, the labor law implementation took out some of the profits, but the beauty was the commercial sector, right? So that's what's going on. Speaking of cars, so cars, we've been talking a lot about the car market. It really did very well, right? Maruti's numbers came out. They fell sort of short of expectations, but they did very well. Tata's numbers came out, TVS numbers came out, and so on and so forth. Mobile phones as a market is going to go down. It's going to go down by about a few percentage points. So you know how mobile phone market, the smartphone market, has been stagnant at about 150 million, right, per year. It's going to go down to 147, 148 million, maybe 146 million. So that 144 million even. So that's not cool. Now, why this is happening? Folks? It's because the memory chip thing has gotten very expensive, right? The memory prices have gotten up. Since memory prices have gotten up, the mobile they've become from an insignificant item to a very very sensitive point when it comes to the bill of materials, as the mobile phones are considered. So mobile phones, as they get expensive, and this is exactly what we predicted, by the way, we pointed this out, as memory chips are going to get more expensive, mobile phones are going to get more expensive, and as mobile phones get expensive, their demand is going to go down by at least 4 or 5%. That's exactly what's playing out. So cheers to us. We've been very good with our predictions. I'm sorry I couldn't share the Excel sheet with you. I'll do that today. I'll definitely do that today. We've been our predictions, they need to be tracked. I'm sure you're looking at the sectors more or less. I'll remind you, I said something about railways as a sector. They have a lot of room to grow in the next 6 months. I said something about the defense sector. I've always been bullish on defense sector because it's very important for the country. I said something about some outliers. Let's say anything to do with Satcom, something to do with the GLP. We considered Nelco, we considered Shelly, even though they were not to be heavy bets, but somewhere around that regard. We talked about gold. We've talked about Aether as a company. We've talked a lot. So we're gonna have a sheet which says everything since the time we've been tracking those things, so we can have an index. We can track ourselves, right? I'm sorry I've not been able to do. I've been very busy. I couldn't even write an article in the past week. So you can imagine. But now, that was sort of a crash course on whatever is happening, right? I hope I'm not missing out on anything. And if I am, we're going to cover everything, so don't worry about it, right? Indian economy, 7%. That's cool. 7.6% in FY23, 9.2 in FY24, 6.5 in FY25, and 7.4 in FY26. That's what we are looking at. It's very interesting how India's growth has been extraordinary, but still India has not been able to get any foreign capital. Foreign inflows are out, right? 85,000 crores in January 1, 2025, and FPI outflows at 16,500 crore. So that's what's happening. Despite good economic fundamentals, we are not being able to attract money. Now, why do you think we are not being able to get money? There's a lot of factors, of course. Number one could be that our state bills are taking the shine off the economy, right? Our subsidy bills and all the fiscal deficit at state level is taking a toll on the economy from a grassroots perspective. Maybe it's these people are warming up on gold. Everybody's preparing for the big crash when it comes to the US dollar and stuff like that, right? Maybe it's not India. So every time when we look at such a big trend, we've got to ask ourselves, is it an India problem or is it a market problem, right? Just as we did when, let's say, HUL numbers were bad, right? We were thinking, is it HUL's problem or is it the market problem? So this is exactly what we've got to figure out. Is it an India problem or is it a market problem? If it was a market problem totally, then maybe Vietnam wouldn't be able to get money, right? So Vietnam is getting money. Does that mean it's not a market problem? Why? Because Vietnam is a much smaller economy. India is a much, much bigger economy. Maybe it's harder to get money when it comes to a certain scale and size, but China has been able to get money. Is it because India doesn't have any exposure to the high-tech play, the AI play, which is taking over everything, right? Is it because we don't have any of those things? Or is it because the rest of the markets, essentially, which are going up, right? Let's say if S&P is going up, so it's a mirage. Now, what do you mean by that? What do you mean that the growth of the US market essentially is a mirage? Everybody says that dollar is going down. The dollar strength, of course, is below 98, which means dollar is going down. As dollar goes down, right, the S&P goes up because it's sort of a form of inflation playing out in the markets. So what some people did was they tracked S&P vis-a-vis gold. They tracked S&P in gold. So as S&P gets tracked in gold, you see the US markets haven't grown at all. In fact, they're the worst that they've ever been in over a decade, like about 12 years or so, right? So it's basically 2012 playing out. when it comes to markets if you price them in gold, right? Now the question is, even if you do that, dollar, let's say dollar is losing value, India is still losing value, then why are foreign investors not looking at India as much, right? Because it should be a hedge against every bad thing. Now there are some systemic concerns, right, which are to be examined. The chief economic advisor says that to be examined. I think it's basically Chief Economic Advisor Mr. V. Anant Nageswaran says investor reluctance to commit to India warrants examination. Right? Currency has depreciated over 6.5%. Rupees value does not accurately uh, showcase its strength, the fundamental strength. So that's the play. I think they're all preparing, they're all bulking up on other things because it's very complicated how things happen. What happens if something becomes goes for a toss when it comes to the primary economies, right? And because of that, India is not being able to do that. So let's see. Speaking of India and investment, there is a very interesting thing that is happening, folks. You know about Ude Desh Ka Aam Nagrik, right? You know about that, right? Udan Yojana, which is basically making air travel accessible for the middle class, Indian middle class. That's very important. That's absolutely important. Now, if you look at the airplanes market, you know two entities, right? Which are the two entities which are most important when it comes to the airplanes market? Come on, let's go. Two entities. They are of geopolitical importance, right? Two players which supply all the planes to the world, and their countries' economies are very, very dependent on their growth. And they Airbus, Boeing. Wow, Mr. Bhavik Shah. Thank you. So Airbus and Boeing, right? So there's a Brazilian company called Embraer, which is also in the fray. And if you remember, India was trying to hedge that particular risk when it comes to US, and by having its own manufacturing of planes, right? They were looking at it. So if you remember, you were looking at Russia, uh, Russian plane. There was a Russian company which manufactured planes and so on and so forth. There were problems when it came to that, but they were looking at that. So Brazilian company, the Embraer, it's basically number three in the play. They also make planes, and they're tying up with Adani's to manufacture planes, folks. Now, the Embraer bestseller is essentially smaller than Boeing 737 and A320, the Boeing and Airbus planes, right? But that's good news. Now, why do you think Embraer's small planes could be good for the Indian market? Why do you think plane smaller than A320, which is a pretty small plane, why is that a good news for Boeing and Airbus? Says Mr. Ankur Pandit. That's correct. Why do you think that's a good news actually for Adani's or for the Indian market itself? We've talked about No, we've not talked about this. I'm sorry, we've not talked about this. So why do you think it's good news? Can you think? Small cities have smaller airstrips and lower payload. That's correct. Mr. Bhavik Shah on fire. And that basically aligns the star for both Embraer and Adani's, right? So let's see how that particular play plays out. We've seen whatever is happening with the submarine manufacturing. Mazagon Dock is going to pick that up. The airplane thing, Adani's are going to pick that up. The ports, airports. Airport density, by the way, is very low in India right now. It's at 0.11 per million people, right? China is at about zero point 0.3, zero point 0.4, and so on and so forth, right? US is in 43.2 decimal places. So it's order of magnitudes higher. And India is at about 0.11. So there's more airports that can be made, right? We have already made a lot of airports. I'll come to the numbers. But this is another, let's say, inflection point when it comes to Indian. Mr. Ankur Pandit says more fuel efficient and hence more suited for low cost carriers. Mr. Ankur Pandit, that's not the right answer. It's not about fuel efficiency, it's about the payload that we can afford, right? Since we are going with Ude Desh Ka Aam Nagrik, we are going to places where the demand is pretty scarce. To cater to that small demand, right, small planes could be very good. That's the real reason. And Mr. Bhavik Shah was right. Let's move on, folks. We've given you, I hope that was fun, right? That was without reading. How was I without reading, folks? I didn't read anything. Yeah, so there's a report which says quick March trampling on e-commerce stores. So if you remember, if you look at Blinkit's numbers came out, Swiggy's numbers came out, Swiggy's loss got widened. It is a pretty big problem, right? Nothing good is happening when it comes to quick commerce, but quick commerce is really taking over e-commerce. E-commerce share is being taken over by quick commerce. So the delivery in minutes model now accounts for roughly 47% of the online grocery market and will outpace e-commerce to control two-thirds of sale in the online grocery play. They say that e-commerce is getting hurt more than Kirana. It's actually the real answer is everybody's gonna get hurt. Everybody gets hurt when it comes to quick commerce. Nobody makes money, right? Even with every economic activity that's happening, Eternal's older business units are making money, not the new ones. Swiggy is draining money because of the whole Instamart expenditure. Reliance is coming in. Amazon, Flipkart is coming in. Big Basket is playing a long forgotten game. Who knows what's going to happen to those guys in a few days, right? So it's very weird whatever is happening. But quick commerce continues to lose money. So Eternal and Blinkit both came out with their numbers. Not very nice. Not very nice. Let's move on, folks. Tata Motors commercial vehicles see 48% decline in Q3 profits. Don't fret. It's labor laws, right? Labor laws. New labor drag codes. Labor codes have also dragged ITC's profit down by 6%. Still made about 5,000 crore of net profit quarter-wise, but 6%. Dixon PAT up 67%. One-time revenue gain. Revenue rises 2%. Right? One-time gain, don't count it. Revenue not going up and it's going to go down. So Dixon is not going to have nice few days in the future. Let's move on, folks. Food weight is going to be cut when it comes to the CPI series, the inflation play. That's gonna make what? The inflation numbers, food inflation numbers, the CPI numbers less volatile. Because more food, more volatility in the number. Less food, less volatility. Food is extremely volatile. So it is right now, CPI has 45%, 45.86%. It's gonna go to 36.75% when it comes to the new CPI series. You know what's gonna go up? The entertainment thing, the travel, a lot of other new age things, they're going to be going up, which essentially signals a growing economy. When the economy's basket, the average basket is less dependent on food and staple, that means the economy is growing. So that's a pretty good thing. In the Amazon app, the amount of attention being given to Amazon now gives a fair idea of the threat Q-commerce poses for the Amazon e-commerce model. So that's exactly what I wrote. Mr. Ankur Pandit said, by the way. So if you remember, I had written an article, a very deep article, about how Flipkart as a business has panned out, right? So Flipkart as a business, if you look at, it has never made money, right? It's still losing about $1 billion, $500 million every year, right? And it's been in business since 2007. That means about 18 years it's been around. Right, in 18 years, Flipkart built an entire e-commerce play. Walmart bought it for about $20 billion, right? 77% for 16 billion. And then comes quick commerce, right? So, and quick commerce is a direct threat to the high frequency items that e-commerce sells, right? So e-commerce has two kind of assortments. One is a high frequency, high volume, low margin grocery play, right? And then is less frequent but high margin, let's say fashion purchases, if you can say that. Fashion, by the way, is also shifting to quick commerce. So everything that Amazon and Flipkart have done in the country as of now, it's all in the toilet, if you know. So it's all in the toilet. It's basically none of it works and none of it makes any sense anymore because quick commerce is eating everything up. So once they take the frequency away, right, they can take the, let's say, long tail purchases away. So if you make a graph of that, the long tail, which is where the value is, that goes away if the frequency goes away, right? That's exactly what is also being looked at when it comes to urban companies model, because the whole insta help thing, it's a high frequency play, right? If you get high frequency, if the frequency of the use of a particular product or a service, or ordering it, if the high frequency goes out, the entire business model gets shaken to the core. So Flipkart and Amazon, they have an existential risk when it comes to quick commerce. And all of that investment, those tens of billions of dollars that both of these companies spent, they all have to be invested back to make sure that they don't die. So that is the, and while they do that, the money isn't guaranteed. So it's not like it's gonna make a lot of money. It's not, right? Blinkit is still running at what, like negative margins, point 0.1, point 1, point 5, point 2, minus 1.5, minus 2.5, and so on and so forth. So it's just a shit show, but it is what it is, and it's gonna kill Kirana. So while they say that it's not gonna kill Kirana, it is, right? Let's move on, folks. We're not gonna discuss politics, right? Mr. Ankus Holmes, Flipkart and Amazon can also build a quick commerce considering they already have the infrastructure. No, the beauty is the infrastructure of quick commerce and e-commerce is very different. So it's not like if you've done quick commerce, e-commerce, you can do quick commerce. Quick commerce is a different muscle. It's a high frequency, high speed, less efficient way of delivering things. So it's basic maths, right? So let's say if you are sorting orders and putting them together, right? Then comes the question of efficiency. You've got 5 orders, you take 5 orders, go, right? That's a traveling salesman problem. So you've got 5 meetings, which one do you align, how, what's the time, so that it comes back and you make most money, right? That is what e-commerce is all about. That they have a lot of orders, they're placing a lot of orders and they're putting them together, and then it's quick commerce is to and fro. Every order is one trip, right? So it's an absolutely different muscle. The dark store design and penetration, the distribution, the density of dark store in a particular area, that's also very different. It doesn't work on a cluster model. It is a, you got to be very hyper local. So it's a different muscle. Everybody is basically going to lose when it comes to this, but it is what it is. Some people thought it was a good idea. Moving on, folks. China is building better ties with Bangladesh when it comes to military, which is very bad news for India, right? Meanwhile, Madam Sheikh Hasina is saying that the illegal government in Bangladesh, the Yunus government, it should be Bangladeshis should screw it up. I mean, topple it. Mr. Ankasa Holmes says these two giants are too big to fail. No. They're not too big to fail. I mean, of course, in a way that they're not going to disappear forever, because Walmart has a lot of money. Amazon has a lot of money. So they're not going to let go of the opportunity. But it's clear. It's clear what's going to happen when it comes to, this particular market itself. The beauty is, right, even when the high frequency, high volume orders are taken away from quick commerce, the money isn't, right? The bottom line isn't. But the question was never off the bottom line, unfortunately, in e-commerce and quick commerce. The question was also off the top line, right? That's how these people judge themselves. So when that happens, it's going to be very weird. What's your take on Instamart opening hybrid stores that work as retail outlets as well as a dark store? I mean, I laugh. Isn't it funny? Isn't it funny? Like, I mean, I know why would they want to do that, to cut on the delivery menace, right? To reduce the load and so on and so forth. But doesn't it go against the entire model, right? In a fight to survive in an irrational environment, in an exuberant environment, in an irrationally exuberant environment, people will do anything, right? So it's one of those moves. But the entire play is pretty sad if you notice, right? Government pact to clear 10 billion submarine deal with Germany. We've talked about that. Mascon Doc. Defense shares should do good, should do well, right? Let's move on, folks. 5 key assurances. Coking coal notified as critical mineral aid to the steel sector. So coking coal, we talked about that. Yeah. So we were talking about the numbers when it comes to food weightage, right? Food goes down from 45.86% to 36%, 36.75. Uh, Transport and information and communication were 8.59. They're going up 12.41%. That's one. Housing, water, electricity, they were 16.9. They're pretty much where they were 17.6, right? Recreation, sports, and culture was 1.68%. And now in the basket, it's 4.86%. Now that should be taken as a very, very big signal. Very big signal, right? So let's move on, folks. We've talked about that. Tata Consumer was looking at buying Denon India. That deal is not going forward. $1.2 billion was quoted as Denon some valuation. The deal has failed to align with Tata Consumer expectation. Tata Consumer is obviously trying its best to match up with everything that's happening in the consumer business, especially when it comes to Reliance. So Reliance is really going all in when it comes to consumer products, right? And Tata is sort of saving its play. This battle has also played out when it comes to Tata's new play. That was also a consumer story, right? The Tata new Big Basket acquisition of 1mg, Big Basket, everything, Cult Fit and so on and so forth, didn't work out well for Tata for its own mistakes. But this acquisition hasn't panned out, right? Let's move on, folks. Indian Aviation, we've talked about that. ITC, Tata Motors, consumer vehicles, we've talked about that. EU-India trade pact will help boost tourism demand for hotels, right? Says the chief of Louvre Hotels Group, the CEO. Louvre Hotels is owned by a Chinese conglomerate, and they say we are very happy, right? Sarovar Hotels has crossed 2,000 crore revenue last year, targeting an 18% growth year on year. So hotel companies are doing very well, and they're supposed to do very well according to the current trends. I hope I'm not missing out on any important number. We've talked about that. India is a room deficient country, so that's what's happening. Indian carriers likely to triple fleet size in 10 years, says Airbus. Air India, in the meanwhile, ordering 30 more Boeing airplanes. That makes me very, very scared. Let's move on, folks. Pretty solid, pretty solid. We've talked about trade opportunities. Bristol Myers moves Supreme Court to stop Zydus from selling a biosimilar cancer drug. So Bristol Myers group, it's a pharma company. They had a cancer drug. Okay. Now their cancer patent, the drug patent was going out of business by May, right? Now Zydus essentially made a biosimilar. Biosimilar is like a generic, but it is a live biological organism's copy instead of a synthesis of the compound, right? That is generic. So they say they made a biosimilar of a particular drug. I'll name you the drug. So it was nivolumab, right? Now they went to the court. They're saying this is patent infringement, and the High Court said that it's not patent infringement because your patent is dying anyway, and this is a lifesaver drug, right? The biosimilar, it costs about 70% lower than the actual drug. So in the interest of the larger audience, larger public, right, we'll have to let it go. And that is how intellectual property has panned out in the pharmaceutical business before as well. But what do you think, right? Let's say if you have a patent, you did all the research and everything, and then you found out that somebody made a biosimilar, and that's got to be approved, even if your patent is expiring in a few months, right? So the court's contention was that your patent is anyway going out of line, right? It's gonna be ending in May, so it's just litigation, right? Essentially. So, but lawyers made money. Let's move on, folks. We've talked about AI, aviation, ports, shipping growth on intact. Yeah, so I talked 0.11 airports per million population in India, 47.35 in US, and 0.39 in China. So airport density per capita, if you can say that, yeah, it is more or less, right? It's almost 4 times in China than India. So a lot of airports in the fray. We've made 165 for airports in 2025 from 75 into 2014. So more than double. That's pretty nice. Let's move on, folks. We've talked about the growth rate of the economy. Manufacturing, we keep talking about manufacturing, so that's okay. Rupee, we've talked about rupee. Geopolitics, strategic power gap, despite good growth, lower inflation, and favorable outlook. We've talked about that. Reforms may push growth rate to 7. We've said. I'm just looking. If you want to write your questions till then, please go ahead. I'll just make sure I'm not missing out on anything, so that you don't lose out on any critical piece of information. Right? A lot of, yeah. Activity based financial norms, that's okay. Million plus cities must prepare a 20-year plan. So they're saying that India used to be a rural economy, and it is still a rural economy for all practical purposes. But India, cities with over a million people in population, they'll have to have a 5-year look, because India has a problem, right? Our cities are absolute shitholes, right? And they're not getting better with time, they're only going worse. So, to combat that particular play, the development of cities essentially was looking at a renewal of monitoring system, right? That said, India also had a 1 lakh crore fund allocated for development of cities. Well, that has been a non-starter because the cabinet approval is waiting. So as that cabinet approval comes, we're gonna be looking. The problem is that it's gonna be hard for India to spend that kind of money. Apparently, we are short of ideas when it comes to developing our cities, and we don't know what to do with 1 lakh crores. Would you buy that? You got to, because it is the truth, right? So that's what's happening. Yeah, so a pretty important data point. Survey shows that goods trade is highly sensitive to exchange rate. A 1% rise in rupee reduces India's total trade by 1.26%. So if your rupee rises by 1%, India's trade goes down by 1.26%, as I told you, right? Because our exports are going to be uncompetitive. When rupee strengthened, merchandise trade deficit widened sharply with an elasticity of minus 1.45, right? Conversely, when rupee weakens, trade balance improves significantly. So that 1.45 number was important. I think I've said everything. Farm productivity, private capital, agri sector. Yeah, sure. Million plus cities. Urban areas to contribute to around 70% of Indian GDP by 2036. Right, 600 million people. Share of urban population in 2011 was about 31%. Now it's at 40%. So India is urbanizing, right? That is a very big thing. Let's move on, folks. Formal skilling could boost jobs by 13%. That's okay. I hope I'm not missing it. Rising digital addiction prompts call for age-based online access. I've been a very big proponent of digital addiction, right? I try to build a company when it comes to digital addiction, the smartphone, Seneca smartphone play, right? That's basically common knowledge now. Australia did it first. Australia banned smartphones at below age 16. France is now looking at banning smartphones below age 14. They're also banning smartphones in school campuses, right? Andhra Pradesh is also looking at banning smartphones. If you go and read the document, the open pitch for Seneca that I had written back in 2021, I guess, right? This is exactly what I had predicted. I had said that as like cocaine was invented in 1865, but it was banned by 1915. So it took the world a good 50 years to ban cocaine, to find out that, oh, this is a problem. Smartphones are just barely 15 years old, 10, 15 years old, right? The first smartphone essentially came out in what, 2004, 2005, if you consider Apple. Blackberry a little before that. So it's been 15, 20 years, right? Now, all the governments world over are going to start banning it. But that's not going to be the solution. The solution is going to be an alternate device which changes how we interact with the technology and for reasons we do so. And that's going to be some product like Seneca, but you never know how that shapes up, right? A lot of people keep coming to me that we want to build something like Seneca and so on and so forth. Mr. Arankur Pandit says, Australia has already implemented such a system. Correcto, Mr. Pandit. Let's move on. Lower productivity and so on and so forth. I've written a lot about it. India has nearly 97 crore internet connections. 85% households own at least one smartphone. Right? It's ubiquitous. It's a disease. People should have helped me when it came to Seneca, but I don't have any problems. I went on to build another thriving enterprise. I'm building an AI. It's awesome. You're gonna hear from me soon. I know I keep saying it and it keeps getting delayed, but good news is very near, very near. Let's move on, folks. Strong local flows offset FPIs. We've talked about that. Adani plans to raise $1.5 billion in yen bonds loans. Cost of debt likely to be 8.5%. Yen unwinding is happening, right? All over the world. Yen yields are going up. Yen yields are going up. Yen, basically, yeah. Is it yields that are going up? Is it the bond prices that are going up? You get the point, right? It's going to be more expensive to borrow in yen. So that's what's happening. By the way, speaking of borrowing, Shapurji Palanji is looking at raising $2.5 billion to refinance its earlier debt, which is due in just a few months. Let's see how that pans out. Very weird. Foreign investors rush to add substance in Mauritius, Singapore. You know why this is happening. Why are foreign investors looking at adding substance in Mauritius and in Singapore? Any clue, folks? We've talked about this. Why do you think they're adding substance? What do they mean when they say they're adding substance to, their entities in Mauritius and Singapore? What do you think? We've talked about this. You should know. Taxation. Mr. Bhavik Shah says taxation. Well, yeah, of course. That's the right answer, right? To the DTAA, the real answer, the better answer would have been the Supreme Court ruling on the Tiger Global case, which essentially avoided preventing the grandfathering and tax avoidance by essentially fronts, right? Some recent case where they changed the interpretation. You're right. Supreme Court case on Tiger Global. That's going to change the world. Let's move on, folks. So they're saying that you can't just have a front, right? And grandfathering won't really work. The term that is, we've discussed deeply about it. Facebook India's net jumped 28%. Google India's net jumps, right? Facebook India did a revenue of about 3,700 crores in this quarter, right? 25% up revenue, Facebook India, and Google's in the same line. Let's move on, folks. Talked about this. Toyota keeps title as the top car maker with record sales. Hey, very big news. You know about the European car market. European car market is selling more EVs now than IC engines. It's almost there, 47% or something of that sort. And the cars are basically EVs are taking over the European market. Do you know what the growth rate of Volkswagen is? It's less than 4%. You know, what about Tesla? It's minus 20%, right? What about the other Stellantis kind of people, somewhere in mid-teens? What do you think is the growth rate of Chinese companies? It's 229%. So European markets, as they transition to electric vehicles, Tesla loses, Volkswagen loses, Stellantis loses. Who wins? China wins. And that, my friends, is a very, very big deal. Very big deal, right? China's auto sector is killing, is absolutely butchering uh, the entire European auto market, which is going to be hurtful because Germany's economy itself depends on its auto sector. That's pretty much the bedrock of Germany's economy, right? So it needs the auto sector to survive, and let's see what happens. Toyota did well, record sales. Let me see. Honda Motors sales fell 7.5%. Right, Japan avoided. Yeah. Toyota, Lexus, both doing well. Let's move on, folks. Swiggy, we've talked about Swiggy. Q3 loss up 33%. That's okay. Revenue rises, loss widens. We've talked about that. Let's move on. IT is not doing that well, folks. Right? IT is not doing that well. I told you that investing in IT would be a little. It needs at least needs some sort of Bahaduri Puraskar, right? So that Bahaduri Puraskar is playing out, folks. We've talked about that. That's exactly what's happening, right? A lot of people said IT is gonna start making money. I mean, investment wise. I said you got to be careful, and for now, I have been right. So we've pretty much covered, I've tried to cover. Now I'm going to take some time as I filter through things that I feel I might have missed, right? So if you have any questions, you can let me know. And I'll be here sifting through the pages. SoftBank is looking at investing 30 billion in OpenAI. OpenAI is a very big linchpin. As Dr. Michael Burry said, it's going to be bad for OpenAI. Let's move on. Dubai's real estate is getting a lot of money. And even though taxation is avoiding Indians investing in Dubai's real estate, right? People are trying their best to get hands of that. And that's becoming a way for Indians to hedge the dollar, rupee depreciation. So a lot of interesting facets are happening. Some investors, what they're thinking, that as dollar falls, as the world de-dollarizes, Indian rupee is gonna go up. And when Indian rupee goes up, they want to invest in India because of what might happen to the dollar. And I've said that that's not gonna happen. Even if dollar falls, it's in India's interest to devalue its currency, and that's what's gonna play out. But a lot of people are moving in both directions. Somebody feels that Indian rupee might just jump. Other people are just prepared for Indian rupee to keep falling for a little while, right? And that's very, very interesting. What do you think is that point when Indian rupee will start getting strengthened? Can you tell me the point when Indian rupee will be forced to correct itself, right? What do you think is that point? Mr. Ankur Pandita, Toyota is still more bullish on plug-in hybrids. What is your view? Well, Toyota has to be bullish on plug-in hybrids. We've talked about that previously. Because if it doesn't do that, it's going to hand over the plate to China, right? Japan is very anti-EV. Japan is very pro-hybrids because that way it preserves its market. It preserves its position. EV is basically all China, right? So I was asking, what do you think is that moment when India will be forced to correct its currency problem? There's 2 or 3 things at play. It's an intelligent question. I hope you understood the question. What's your view? What do you think is going to happen? Senior living. Celebs losing out to influencers. Well, that's not a huge thing. Vodafone is coming out of the survival mode to a growth mode, right? Lines up 45,000 crore capex plan, 3 years in a turnaround paid. They've been able to raise a bit of debt, a few thousand crores. Since the government is essentially forgetting the dues for a while, 10 years, Vodafone is looking at focusing on its circles where it makes money. 99.2% of Vodafone's revenues come from three circles only. That's where it's going heavy on. The company might just be able to survive with the AGR dues forgotten, right? That's very important. The question is, would government or would the courts give the same privilege to Airtel as well? If the government or the courts give the same privilege to Airtel, you're gonna see huge, uh, uh, let's say gains for Airtel investors, because that's gonna be a free money for them, right? If Airtel also gets the similar tax advantages or AGR advantages as Vodafone. Let's move on, folks. There's a very important Jio, BP and Adani co-location plan. Jio, BP and Adani were looking at, let's say, Adani's CNG stations to have Jio, BP as the fuel suppliers, the petrol, diesel suppliers, and Jio, BP players having Adani as CNG suppliers, right? But they have hit a regulatory hurdle. That is going to be a very interesting collaboration between two very big groups, right? Let's move on, folks. As gold has risen, the jewelry players have sort of fallen down. The jewelry demands are down by 30%. Mostly people who are making jewelry are coming out with their old gold itself, right? So let's see how these people navigate. Most of the demand is for gold bars and so on and so forth. No questions, no answers on how on when India will have to essentially take a look at rupee devaluation. So two reasons. If Indian inflation starts rising up, right? If India's internal economy sees elevated inflation levels, right? And then crude rises, that's when India will really have to fix its currency, because then it'll be double whammy. So if crude goes expensive, India will have to pay more, right? And that will lead to inflationary hurdles. Right now, it's no problem because India's inflation is pretty solid, right? But if inflation starts climbing up, right, and then crude also starts going up, that's when you're going to see India actually going to move towards, rupee revaluation, which will be opposite to the devaluation. Let's move on, folks. Social media ban for children. We talked a lot about AI. Pharma IT unable to gain from rupee fall. Tariff big worry. We've talked about that. Rupee fall should have led to good news for pharma companies because they export a lot, right? So their exports make a lot of money. They earn in dollars and so on and so forth. Not happening. A lot of complex problems for them. Let's move on, folks. But we've talked about that, so I'm not going to explain. Let's move on. Microfinance, by the way, is getting a boost from the government back again. 8,000 crore credit guarantee amid funding stress. Microfinance as a sector really screwed up the banking sector. You know about that, right? Now it seems like the worst is over and it's going to get back on its feet. Let's see what happens. Let's move on, folks. We've talked a lot about this. Great. TVS really did well. TVS is a great company. Moving on, folks. We've talked about the deal a lot. I think I'm pretty much set, folks. Am I missing out on anything? Do you have any questions? India targets $100 billion oil and gas investments by 2030, right? That's to basically energy security is past. Now it's energy independence, says the Prime Minister. Let's see how that plays out. Let's move on, folks. Seafood exports, I've talked about that. I'm pretty good, man. In that initial monologue, which I did without reading, I think it did well. Textiles, seafoods, auto, we've talked a lot about that. Electronics, priority segment. Pharma, good, good. EU deal is nice. Key ratio at a 14-year-old low. There's a ratio, by the way. Do you know about that? Gold to silver ratio. Gold to silver ratio basically says which is overvalued, which is volatile, which is not. So that gold to silver ratio, if it goes below 45, right, it basically means silver is overvalued, right, relative to gold. And if it's about 60-70, that means it's pretty stable, right now it's gotten below 45. As it gone below 45, you can people are saying that you can expect silver to correct, but other people are saying silver is going to be very, very bullish. So that is the risk associated with silver. Let's move on. We've talked about that. So you've got to keep checking. Blackstone, 10,000 crores in Chennai for a digital infra hub. Done. No questions, folks? No questions for you? From you, I mean. No questions from you? Starlink will have to seek the nod again for the Gen 2 services. It'll have to get approvals again for the on-device play, right? Which is the main market. So it's going to lead to a few more delays before Starlink essentially enters in the country. Well, that's no surprise. We've talked about that. JSW Infrastructure planning a 16,500 crore capex for FY 27-28. Mr. Bhavik Shah says Tesla eye turning its car factories into humanoid factories. That's also a news. Tesla factories, the initial models, they're going to be changing into humanoid robot production, which is essentially a sign that Tesla's car factories or car as a product, Tesla as a car company, it's not going to be a car company, it's going to be a robot company. As it tries to be a robot company, the predictable car business has gone for a toss. And you know whom to blame for that, right? BYD. Speaking of BYD, what's BYD stock doing, folks, these days? Anyone checking? Toyota number world 3 in two-wheelers, that's correct. BYD stock, let me jump from, oh, it's down. Holy shit. It should go up. BYD is deeply undervalued, I think. Yeah. BYD stock is still going down, man. Very weird. Commercial vehicles doing very well. We've talked about that. Marico has bought a popcorn company from PVR. PVR has some sort of non-core divesting to make some money. PVR is in trouble, man. Theatre business is in trouble. Let's move on, folks. Nominal GDP at 10.5 to 11%. Fiscal deficit at 4.2. Fiscal deficit target is 4.4. Pretty good. Nominal GDP 11%. That's cool. With inflation about 2.6 to 4%, whatever. It's going to be somewhere around 7.5% the growth, which is pretty much in target, right? Let's move on. Yeah, we've talked about that. Some bullshit, if you want to read some bullshit, 3.8 billion people may face extreme heat by 2050. Climate models are a scam. Let's move on. SoftBank was looking at buying a company called Switch. Not gonna happen. What's your take on Tata now looking to go big globally in commercial vehicles? Oh yeah, the Iveco thing, right? That's very necessary because as JLR struggles, this is a question by Mr. Ankur Pandit, by the way. As JLR struggles, the automotive sector itself getting a lot of getting seriously crowded because of everything that happens, you're gonna see some serious rise when it comes to commercial vehicles and their valuations, right? The tractor business, it's really gonna go a lot. It's gonna go well, right? So it's very important that Tata, and that's why the divestment plan, right? That's why they divested. Basically, this was the idea, right? Mr. Bhavik Shah asks, let's put BYD on the tracker. We should. I mean, I'm seriously confused why BYD would not be doing well. BYD has literally killed the market. Yeah, its margins are not that great, right? But as compared to everybody else, I mean, it is doing what it's doing. There's no reason why BYD shouldn't be really well valued. I mean, it's valued at about $150 billion when Tesla is at about $1.5 trillion. It's almost unbelievable, right? Not 1.5, $1.8 trillion. So it's very weird. And it's all hype of the humanoid robots, which might or might not work. So, very weird. Let's move on, folks. Done. Microfinance, I've talked about that. Russia, Ukraine, everything is pretty much where it was. Although the last hostage has been collected by Israel. Geopolitically, things are in the toilet, but Israel is out of trouble. Let's move on. Some weird shit happening. Dark tourism. Uh, People going to dark tourism like Jallianwala Bagh and all of these places where tragedies happened. So people go to those places and they reflect. So they basically reflect on, the tragic past to become better human beings, I guess. I don't know. But the point is, dark tourism is taking place a lot. If you want to watch a very, very good movie related to dark tourism, very, very beautiful movie, it recently came out. It's called A Real Pain. A Real Pain is written and directed by Jesse Eisenberg. Jesse Eisenberg was the person who played Mark Zuckerberg in Social Network, right? So he's now a writer and director. He's a pretty good intellectual person, right? So he wrote a movie called A Real Pain. It had Kieran Culkin. I hope I'm pronouncing his right name. He was the person who was a part of the Succession play. He played the younger brother. Uh, Roman, right? Very, very important character, legendary show, Succession. So they came together for Real Pain, and he probably got an Oscar or nomination for it. Beautiful movie. People said that Jesse Eisenberg is like the rightful heir of Woody Allen, sir, right? And it is a pretty solid movie. A lot of humor, a lot of serious moments. Pretty good movie, and it's basically related to dark tourism. So that's a weekend movie recommendation for you. Real Pain, very nice movie. Let's move on, folks. I was shocked, by the way, how good that movie was. I almost watched it in the theater. So I wanted to watch it in the theater, and the show got cancelled because nobody else was. So I am used to watching movies alone, sitting alone in the theater. Nobody is watching that. I go and watch an art movie, right? But I missed it. So sorry about that. Great movie. Let's move on. Agri loan rethink, very important. JSW Steel to invest 2 lakh crore over 5-6 years, boost capacity by 50%. So if you look at JSW, it's on fire when it comes to capex, all kinds of capex, all units of JSW firing all cylinders when it comes to capex. We should all be very, very thankful. JSW, the way it has, you know, risen in the past 10 years, it's almost unbelievable. It's almost unbelievable. We all missed out a very big earning opportunity. I mean, I did. I definitely did. I thought, when JSW, when this government came in 2014, I thought JSW is going to get screwed because this is India, right? Businesses rise and fall with political empires and changes. But JSW, they're going to rule the world one day. Let's move on, folks. EMIs for Dubai Dream Homes, FEMA violations. I talked about that. Let's move on. Yeah, folks, I think we are pretty much done. I am just on the final stretch. I hope you enjoyed the show, by the way. Right? I hope it was nice and important. I hope it was fun. Yeah, I've done a great job, man, in the initial monologue. I basically covered everything. Three more global companies set to hop on India's GCC train: Zoom, T-Mobile, and Southwest Airlines. Southwest Airlines, by the way, is the world's most successful airline company. Uh, Indigo says Indigo is basically Southwest Airlines of India. When every airline was down in the toilet after 9/11, Southwest Airlines still made money, right? It is a very extremely well run airline. The promoter of Indigo, the ex promoter of Indigo, is now on the board of Southwest Airlines, so you can understand they're gonna have a GCC in the country. GCCs India's are heavy, right? 1800 GCCs already, 1200 plus global enterprises, 2.1 million people employed, $68 billion of contribution to Indian GDP. GCCs are going to rise to 4,000, from 1800 to 4,000 in the next few years. Let's move on. Car companies looking at rolling out 30 new models. Surge in demand. Private sector activity, that's cool. JustPay has become India's first unicorn in 2026 with a $50 million raise, Westbridge Capital. Some of that money needs to flow in here. You know what I'm saying, right? It really does. It really does. Iran, by the way, has killed about 5,000 people. It's weird, right? 6,000 people, maybe even more. At least some people say the numbers could be 12,000 people. So weird. God damn it. FDI into China has also fallen 9.5% on year. Very weird. Inflows in India. Yeah, that's okay. And with that, we come to the end of 205th episode of Thinker's Frequency. Our daily mental workout. I'm sorry. I think I got disconnected, folks. Sorry, I got disconnected, I feel. But yeah, with that, we come to the end of the 205th episode of Thinker's Frequency, our weekly mental workout, our weekly dose of insights and analysis that don't lead to paralysis right before we punch in, right? It's 9:49. We should punch in anytime. I wish you a beautiful day and week ahead, personally and professionally. I'll see you next week, same place, same time. Hopefully. There's a question. The EU deal has given 5 years of leeway for Indian EVs. What's your view on this? Right? EU deal has not. It's not really going to affect Indian automotive sector, to be honest. EU is a dead market. Europeans. India doesn't have anything to fear when it comes to European automotive sector. What we need to fear is China. The Chinese automotive sector, that's where the problems lie. Let's see what happens there, right? So with that, please take care. I hope you had fun. I hope it was nice. I hope it was valuable. It was definitely very valuable for me. I was abreast with everything. We've covered everything. You should be rest assured. If you like the episode, do what you want to do. Cheers. Bye-bye. Take care. I should thank Mr. Ankur Pandit, Mr. Bhavik Shah, Mr. Ankasa Holmes, and Mr. Tushar Tiwari. Bye-bye. And everybody else who watched, of course. Kind of a sloppy end, right?